Story 1. Tyra Banks. I really enjoyed watching America's Next Top Model as a kid, but rewatching it when I was older revealed that Tyra and her team often mistreated the contestants for entertainment. Story 2. Oprah is a hypocrite, has endorsed problematic things, and is overall quite performative. Story 3. Naomi Campbell. I admire her for being one of the first black models to grace major magazine covers, alongside others like Iman and Beverly Johnson, to name a few. I can't imagine the racism and struggles she faced to make it in the industry. Then she threw her cell phone at her assistant. Then she embezzled charity funds last year. So no, I'm good. Story 4. Rachel Ray. I had a big crush on her years ago and frequently watched her show, 30-Minute Meals, on the Food Network. However, she began to disappoint me by appearing in numerous commercials, and I discovered that she was often unkind to fans, servers, and people in general. Her unpleasant attitude and commercial ventures completely turned me off. Story 5. Jared Leto. I was enamored with him as a teenager, especially by 30 Seconds to Mars and Requiem for a Dream. I developed a strong aversion to him as I grew older and recently found out that he has disturbing allegations against him, including being labeled a super creep with a borderline cult following. He hosts private island retreats with white robes and group meditation, employing various manipulation tactics. Additionally, he reportedly sold tickets for fans to spend the night in his bed. Story 6. I used to be a big fan of Emma Roberts. I loved Nancy Drew and Aquamarine. Then I found out she had a violent incident with Evan Peters in a hotel room. It was disturbing. I can't stand her anymore. Story 7. Ashton Kutcher used to be well-liked, but now he gives off negative vibes, especially after defending Danny Masterson. Story 8. Not particularly a celebrity, but Justin Tucker is arguably the greatest kicker in National Football League history. He followed the path of Deshaun Watson, who has faced serious allegations of sexual misconduct. Story 9. Chris Brown. I enjoyed his music and even had a crush on him as a child. That changed for obvious reasons. I appreciate that I quickly lost my admiration for him after the domestic violence incident, especially knowing people my age who still support him. It's tragic. Story 10. James Franco grew up watching the Spider-Man movies and enjoyed many of the other films he appeared in during that time. I watched The Disaster Artist while experiencing a psychedelic trip, and it changed my perspective, even though I haven't seen The Room. Regardless of that, he has been involved in serious allegations. Thank goodness Weird Al has consistently been a good person throughout his life. Story 11. Tom Cruise's treatment of his daughter and his association with Scientology have led me to decide not to watch any movies featuring him. Story 12. I met Armie Hammer at the stage door after his play in New York City, and he couldn't have been nicer. I referenced an old show he had been on, Reaper, and he mentioned that one of the co-stars had come to see the performance. He also made sure to sign everything people handed to him right after "Call Me by Your Name." He seemed very kind. Story 13. I used to admire Chrissy Teigen, but then she started to behave poorly. She became a hypocrite when it came to light that she privately messaged a then 17-year-old Courtney Stoughton to kill herself and bullied her relentlessly. Story 14. Rihanna and her clothing brand that uses sweatshops. She was smirking while people were protesting against her as she was coming out of the courthouse. I think it was during her husband's trial. Her smirk rubbed me the wrong way. Story 15. Mickey Rourke, once a talented actor, is now appearing in a low-quality reality television show at the age of 72. Story 16. Jimmy Savile was a superstar DJ and charity fundraiser. However, after his death, it was revealed that he had been a notorious pedophile the entire time. Major organizations had been covering up for him, and he was perceived as too famous to hold accountable. Operation U-Tree was launched by the Metropolitan Police in October 2012, shortly after an ITV documentary aired multiple allegations of sexual abuse against Savile. It uncovered a vast pattern of abuse spanning decades and also led to investigations and prosecutions of other high-profile individuals. Story 17. Jackie Chan faced criticism for his infidelity and for how he treated his children. Story 18. Keanu Reeves is a legend, and it would break my heart if it were discovered that he is secretly unkind. Story 19. Travis Scott used to enjoy his music, but I cannot respect him after he continued to perform while people were losing their lives at Astroworld. Story 20. This might be a niche topic for people from the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, but Rolf Harris comes to mind. I remember watching his shows, where he painted fantastic black and white pictures that you couldn't recognize until the last 5 brush strokes. He played the didgeridoo and performed songs like Sunrise and Jake the Peg. He even created a funny skit song about AC/DC on the radio. Then we discovered what he was like behind closed doors. Yes, he faced the consequences that society could impose. Yes, he was stripped of every award he ever earned. Yes, he is deceased. Still, the damage he caused outweighs all of that. Story 21. Ewan McGregor. I enjoyed his movies after seeing him in Star Wars at 12. My mom even got me his movie pillow book for my 14th birthday. Then he came out in support of Roman Polanski. I cannot understand how a man with children could want that individual pardoned. Story 22. I grew up listening to Bill Cosby on records and knew many of the bits by heart, but I never mention them now. Story 23. Kobe Bryant. I can't get over the tragic incident. He knew what he did. Michael Jordan. Both are great basketball players, but... Story 24. Marilyn Manson always came across as incredibly well-spoken and resonated with me as a misfit teen who felt misunderstood by nearly everyone in my life. I ignored many red flags because of his shock rocker persona when I looked up to him. By the time everything came out about the allegations, it became clear that he was always a problematic figure. Story 25. James Corden. I really liked his Carpool Karaoke. Then, the news that he was the next Ellen DeGeneres came out, along with that unfortunate interaction with actor Patrick Stewart. Story 26. Ellen thought it was cool that she was herself in a time when people didn't accept it. It's a shame that she took the phrase, "You are what you eat," literally and changed for the worse. Story 27. Gwen Stefani. I was a huge No Doubt fan as a teenager. I wanted to be her so badly. Now she is promoting a prayer application owned by Alex Jones. Story 28. Mel Gibson is known for his troubling behavior and controversial views. Tom Cruise is associated with a controversial belief system. Tom Sizemore struggled with substance abuse. Russell Brand has faced serious allegations, and Danny Masterson has also been accused of similar offenses. Oprah has faced criticism for her actions. Barbara Walters has been described as having a negative impact on women and children with her inappropriate questions. There are concerns regarding any celebrity who supported an accused individual for the presidency. Story 29. Nick Carter's rape allegations and the support from the group were disappointing for me. It really saddens me because I grew up loving their music. Story 30. Will Smith was very likable. However, after the incident at the awards ceremony and attempting to portray a tough image, his reputation declined significantly. Story 31. Roseanne was a feminist and humorous for her time. However, she later adopted extreme views and became associated with a specific political movement. It was also revealed that she struggled in her role as a mother in real life. Her fame had a corrupting influence on her. Story 32. When Kanye criticized the Bush administration for their failure regarding Hurricane Katrina, he became an icon to me. It was a formative moment. I grew up listening to his music and admired his artistry for many years. I haven't thought about his earlier work in over 6 years. He has changed significantly. Story 33. Jerry Seinfeld. After seeing his stand-up comedy, I realized that all his fame and fortune were handed to him by Larry David, who is a hilarious genius. Story 34. Snoop thought he had principles until he wore that MAGA hat and performed at the Ku Klux Klan inauguration. Story 35. Oprah Winfrey. I loved her show in the past. She popularized Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil but has never really commented on that. I don't dislike her, but I no longer respect her as I once did. Story 36. John Mulaney. Yes, he cheated on his wife. Yes, lots of people get divorced. Accuse me of being overly attached to avoid thinking badly about him. but it's the way he talks about his life now and his sobriety. It all feels so performative, not fake by any means. It's like he's saying, "Look at me. I use drugs. Don't look at my ex-wife. Look at me now with my new wife and kids and sobriety," especially after all of his routines about his ex-wife. The fact he's never mentioned it or apologized, even once in passing, would have been enough. Story 37. Sean Connery. I used to think he was attractive, but I found out he was a proud abuser. He didn't believe there was anything wrong with hitting a woman, and he stated this multiple times. Most men who assault their partners at least pretend to feel regret. Story 38. Aaron Rodgers, a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, is an all-time great National Football League quarterback. He lied about his vaccination status during a pandemic and faced no punishment. Following that incident, he has exhibited general arrogance. Story 39. Elton John. I saw he took someone's Tupperware, and I can't take it anymore. It seems like all of his charity work was just a front to hide the true monster. Story 40. Conor McGregor is an Irish star on the rise. However, he began to attract attention for his controversial remarks and actions towards others, which was unexpected. The subsequent events led me to think, "Good. I told you so." In response to his behavior. Story 41. Neil Patrick Harris disrespected Amy Winehouse and mocked her death shortly after she passed away. Story 42. Elon Musk. I bought into the hype. I was excited about electric cars and loved the idea that we had a real-life Tony Stark. However, as time passed, it became increasingly clear that it was all misleading, and he appears to be a con artist. Beyond his unethical dealings and questionable actions, he is simply an unsettling person, resembling an uncanny valley approximation of what aliens might perceive a human to be. Story 43. Joe Rogan, in his earlier days, engaged in interesting conversations with individuals from diverse backgrounds. However, it has now evolved into a repetitive cycle of the same comedians, politicians, and conspiracy theorists promoting a specific narrative. Story 44. Jackie Chan. He appeared to be the most wholesome guy in the world, and his movies made me very happy. However, I later learned about his multiple affairs, abandoning his illegitimate daughter for being a lesbian, and his close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. He also seemingly abandoned his son after he was caught with drugs. Additionally, I discovered that he used stunt doubles. Ironically, even Jet Li and Donnie Yen have used them as well. Story 45. Bill Murray. I was a fan until I learned how difficult he is on set. The way he treated Lucy Liu was unacceptable. Now he is going around giving interviews trying to repair his reputation. Story 46. Chris Pratt. I loved him so much on Parks and Recreation, but now I can't stand anything with him in it anymore. Story 47. I got a picture with Peter Dante, known for his role in Grandma's Boy, along with an autograph. A year later, I discovered why Adam Sandler no longer works with him. Peter Dante used a racial slur towards a black hotel worker for not recognizing him. I quickly tore up that autograph. Story 48. I used to really respect Jordan Peterson, but after watching a lot of his commentary, he seems to have lost touch. Story 49. Jared Leto was a significant part of my childhood because of 30 Seconds to Mars. I also appreciated his acting in Lord of War and Requiem for a Dream, along with a few other early films. However, he didn't speak to us when we went backstage for a concert in 2013. Then the whole cult-like experience began. Story 50. My dad. I used to think he was a paragon of kindness, a good moral compass, and wise. Then my sisters told me he hit them, hates gay people, and loves Donald Trump and Elon Musk. I recognize the man he is now, and while I love him, I no longer respect him. Story 51. Marilyn Manson. His music helped me through high school and my early adulthood. I appreciate how many people he turned away from the clergy during his peak. Much like many shock rockers, his records are often underrated due to the spectacle. There was always much to appreciate personally. Even before all the allegations, he was performing poorly and embarrassing himself and his fans. Yes, he has been cleared of all charges, but I believe that where there's smoke, there's fire. Now he comes off as creepy and untrustworthy, and I can't shake that opinion. Story 52. I always thought Kelsey Grammer was so funny, and I used to love Frasier reruns. Now I can't cope with the idea that he supports Trump. Story 53. Bill Maher. I used to be deeply into atheism as a teenager, so I enjoyed the anti-religious content. However, later I realized I mostly disagree with him politically. Story 54. Neil Gaiman. I used to love his work, mainly Sandman, and thought he was one of the most down-to-earth authors. He is accused of inappropriate behavior with 9 women. Now I want to burn my Sandman paperbacks. Story 55. Will Smith could sing, act, and was charming and smooth, but then came the slap. Everything he built his brand on was destroyed in seconds. Story 56. Mark Calloway, also known as The Undertaker, spent most of his adult life telling stories about his level of commitment to the business. The things he put his body through to reach that level were intense. Then he had Donald Trump on his podcast, spent the whole episode praising him, and ended by bringing his daughter out to meet our civilly liable president and tell him how glad she was that he would protect girls like her. A strong rejection is in order. It's time to distance ourselves from him and move on. Story 57. Bill Nye. My kids and I loved his show and enjoyed seeing interviews with him, but when we met him in person, he was not pleasant. Other people have confirmed that his behavior was not an isolated incident. He is consistently unpleasant. Story 58. Drew Barrymore. When she tried to hire replacement workers during the writer's strike, it really bothered me. You would think she would respect the unions. Story 59. Dave Grohl. I used to think he was a very cool person, but there is nothing admirable about cheating on your spouse. Story 60. I used to admire John Lennon, the music, the message, the persona, but then I learned how he treated his first wife, Cynthia, and their son, Julian. After their divorce, he fought in court to pay as little child support as possible and left them struggling financially while he moved on with his new life. Cynthia, in a moment of financial desperation, ended up auctioning off old love letters John had written to her. One of the bidders, who was anonymous at the time, offered far more than anyone else. She accepted the offer. Days later, she received a package in the mail. Inside were all the letters she had sold, along with a small note that read, "Never sell your memories." It was signed by Paul McCartney. John sang about peace and love, but when it came to the people closest to him, he showed neither. His message to the world was peace, but his actions at home told a very different story. Story 61. Dave Grohl. I have been a fan of his career since I was in 5th grade after watching the music video for Best of You by Foo Fighters. That was what really got me into music. I thought he looked so cool in it. I was 10 or 11 years old, and for the next 20 years I genuinely thought he was a wholesome guy and rock star. After the cheating and child scandal last year, I stopped caring. I no longer feel any admiration for him. Now it's just indifferent. I really couldn't care less. Story 62. Graham Linehan created and wrote some of the greatest comedies of all time, including Father Ted, Black Books, and The IT Crowd. He also contributed to other shows, authored several books and articles, and was a hilarious, engaging, and smart talk show guest. However, he later became a controversial figure and faced significant backlash, leading to the deterioration of his career and personal life. Story 63. Ryan Reynolds and Dwayne Johnson both play similar roles in their movies. Dwayne's appeal for donations for Hawaii, alongside Oprah, felt inappropriate. Story 64. Kat Von D. I looked up to her so much when I was younger. Even crazier to say that now as a tattoo artist. It really went downhill for me during the pandemic. She called masks chin diapers and constantly expressed the oppressed elite Californian rhetoric. The nail in the coffin was her recent interview with Theo Von. She mentioned how everyone has tattoos these days and that it's boring now. She seems to have forgotten what a trailblazer she was, criticizing an industry she partly popularized just because she feels like she doesn't stand out anymore. So she's finding new, less popular things to base her personality on, in an effort to make herself different from the rest of us. There are many other reasons as well, but those are the main ones I remember. Story 65, Taylor Swift, I was a fan, but not the weird one. Then she came to Brazil and took an inappropriate photo with the family of a deceased fan. That was one of the creepiest things I've seen. Why did she need to be in a full tour bodysuit? She is a billionaire and could have met the family wearing something more appropriate in a meeting space, rather than in her dressing room before the show. In my opinion, it is and always will be disrespectful and in poor taste. There is no respect for the family and their loss. Story 66. Brad Pitt. He physically assaulted Angelina and mistreated the children as well. The lawsuit is still ongoing. Story 67. Drake. When he first emerged, I appreciated his fusion of hip-hop and R&B and his rap song style. Take Care is one of the few albums I can listen to without skipping. The rest is history. Story 68. Russell Brand. Like many, my first introduction to Russell Brand was in the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Then I found his comedy special and enjoyed it. I saw him debate conservative commentators about economic policy, drug laws, and thought it was really inspirational how he overcame heroin addiction. He helped others get their lives on track by actually doing work, not just saying, "Oh, your book helped me." Then came the vaccine controversy, which didn't completely turn me against him. After that, he started dressing like a religious figure and giving off cult leader vibes. Then there were the sexual assault allegations, followed by his full embrace of extreme political views, which seemed to contradict everything he stood for prior to the pandemic. I wondered if this shift was meant to cultivate a loyal fan base that would support him through the allegations he anticipated would surface in the future. There are probably other things scattered throughout the years that I liked or disliked, but I can't recall them now. To clarify, the sexual assault allegations sealed the deal for me. The cult leader persona had already diminished my feelings toward him. The vaccine controversy was just one aspect I disliked about a person I had once admired. I still have friends who share vaccine skepticism, and I don't dislike them for that. It's just my least favorite aspect of their beliefs. However, if they started attracting serious allegations, that would change my perception of them as individuals. Story 69. The full list of people who signed the petition in support of Roman Polanski includes Eva Green, Whoopi Goldberg, and Ewan McGregor. The list is profoundly disappointing and reflects how some individuals can be quite disheartening. Natalie Portman is one of the few who have come forward to retract their support and apologize. While not as significant, Jack Black's involvement was also disappointing. Story 70. J.K. Rowling for her active anti-trans agenda. She deliberately chooses to harm a group of people using her power and resources. Story 71. Nicki Minaj as a sexual assault survivor, marrying a rapist was not acceptable to me. Even her defending him made me uncomfortable. Story 72. Arnold Schwarzenegger lied about having a child with his maid for 14 years. He probably would have kept it a secret until his wife found out. His wife was pregnant at the same time as the maid. Story 73. Johnny Depp. I absolutely fell in love with him as a kid, and it was a special bond one shared with my mom and grandma. We all had a crush on him. As I got older and watched more of his films, many of them became all-time favorites. I can't watch anything he's in anymore. It's just too sad and disappointing for me. I make it a point to watch several new movies every year now, so I'm never in that position again where my entire love of an art form revolves around one person. Story 74. Hate to say it, but Morgan Freeman is someone I once read dated his step-granddaughter. At least that's what the man who murdered her claimed. I can't unlearn that information. He creeps me out now just like Woody Allen. Story 75. I do not admire any celebrities because I do not know them well enough to make that assessment. Some seem like good people, but I have been wrong too many times to take anything at face value. Story 76. Russell Brand. I admired him and agreed with much of his worldview. I met him a couple of times, read all his books, and share a similar journey in sobriety. It's astounding how much he has changed since being accused of sexual assault. He transitioned from a passionate vegan to a meat eater, from liberal to right-wing, moved from the UK to America, and is now just another hypocritical grifter. Story 77. Van Morrison is an outspoken critic of vaccinations. He has always been labeled as difficult, but jeopardizing lives is something else. Story 78. Snoop Dogg has released many albums, and I have attended several of his concerts. His complete turnaround on Donald Trump, from denouncing him as a racist to supporting him and performing at his inauguration, has turned me off. Similarly, Ice Cube, who used to be a true anti-establishment voice in America, now participates in soft interviews with Tucker Carlson. Story 79. I was a Kiss fan growing up, and I really admired Gene Simmons because he was a rock star who was educated, well-spoken, didn't do drugs, and didn't drink alcohol. However, when Kiss removed their makeup, he started talking more, and it became clear that he struggled to empathize with others unless he or someone he cared about had personal experience with their situations. He made hurtful comments to people who were suicidal, telling them to just end their lives. He supported Donald Trump and complained about living in California and having to pay taxes like everyone else, despite his considerable wealth. He spoke about former band members with addiction issues as if they should have just overcome their struggles to work harder. He expressed dissatisfaction with the changing cultural landscape, particularly regarding how he could no longer objectify and speak crudely about women, indicating he was unhappy with the world unless women occupied a specific role in his life. It became apparent that he has serious flaws, and I stopped admiring him long ago. Story 80. J.K. Rowling. I loved her books as a child and teenager. She was marketed as an incredibly generous person who was the first to fall off the billionaire list due to charitable giving, and she represented an inspiring rags-to-riches story. Now it seems that the narrative was exaggerated, and she has become an influential figure in an international hate movement. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.